We're going to go ahead and get started. We want to welcome our WSMA members, school educators who've logged on, WMEA members, and other music and art education stakeholders to our first ever Wisconsin Education Forum. The purpose of today's forum is for us to learn more about what's going on currently at the state level in education, with conversations that are occurring between the Department of Public Instruction and other Wisconsin education leadership associations. The forum will include suggestions about ways we can proactively work at the local level and to assure student-centered and well-rounded educational opportunities remain available for our Wisconsin students. And today we are so fortunate to be here with Tamra Mouw, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. In this role, she partners with educators, schools, families, community members, nations, governmental agencies, and professional organizations to provide us with leadership, professional learning, and resources. And she's committed to the promotion of equity and advancing innovative learning for all students to the graduate, community college, and career-ready push for all of our kids. Previously, I was fortunate to work with Tamra in her role in the Department of Curriculum Instruction with the Madison School District, and where she was a reading specialist, coordinator for literacy, and she also, I think you'll find in this conversation, has equity at the center of everything she does. And I'd also like to welcome Julie Palkowski, who is the Arts and Creativity Education Consultant with the Department of Public Instruction. She's previously been a music educator and a principal, and she has served as president of CDAY, which is the State Education Agency for Directors for Arts Education. And she participates often in national panels on arts topics. She also curates and moderates the social media website and activities for CDAY, including podcasts and blogs. So we welcome them both today. And I want to get started right away with asking you to give us just a quick answer to a get to know you question so we can learn a little bit more about you before we get into some of our main questions today. I'll start with Tamra. Could you describe for our listeners in 25 words or less, what brings you the greatest sense of accomplishment in and through your role at DPI, and what would that be?
Great. Well, Laurie, you know me, so pinning me down to 25 words is always going to be a challenge. I think you said it right in the beginning, in the intro. I am just passionate about equity education. And so making sure that all students have access to a well-rounded education. As part of that, I think I'm probably at 25 words, so I should probably stop. But yeah, I think that'll come up more as we go through today.
Fantastic. And same question to you, Julie. What brings you the greatest sense of accomplishment in and through your role at DPI? Julie, can you please unmute?
Thank you for reminding me about that. I have the honor of supporting our school communities in building arts education opportunities, and that includes a lot of the professional development and resources for our educators and for our school staff and students. So I'm just very honored to be able to be a part of that. So thank you all for being here today.
Fantastic. So I'm going to start with Tamra with one of the main questions we've been receiving through Wisconsin School Music Association, as well as I'm hearing through other channels. There's a sense of conversations happening nationally and then what's happening locally. We'd like to hear about conversations you're currently engaged in with other state education associations as we look toward fall 2020 and the different scenarios for what school may look like. Who's involved in the conversations you're having, and what can you share about what these conversations look, sound, and feel like?
Okay, hopefully I have more than 25 words because I'm definitely going to need those, but I'll try to get it all packed in. So Yeah, it's been quite a journey, I think, that we've all been on with COVID-19. One of the things that came out of from our legislature is Act 185. And so the Department of Public Instruction has been tasked with creating a plan to help schools and districts transition from being in this COVID remote learning to being back in buildings. So so that's how this plan is oriented, why it came up, and that's what we've been working on. So thinking about that idea of what does fall look like, what is returning back to school buildings going to look like, is nobody knows for sure. So what we're trying to do is plan for all of the scenarios. So we have 3 big scenarios that we're planning for. One would be if we were returning to schools, for the most part, everybody's returning to schools. So that's one aspect of it. The other would be if we were in a virtual environment. And then the third scenario would be us being more of a blended environment. So thinking about it in those 3 buckets. So all of that is really dependent upon the health of the community. So, but if we get I've noticed that sometimes people get paralyzed in that conversation about, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the health of the community. So we've just been really thinking very systematically about that idea of it could be everybody's back in buildings, and we have to think about the health requirements to keep people safe with distancing and whatnot. We could be back in buildings and then we have a health outbreak, so we need to go virtual and then transition back to a virtual environment. Or we could be in this place, scenario 3, like I've been talking about, that idea of a blended where some people are in buildings and some people are at home. That could be educators, that could also be students, just depending upon people's age and health. So that's kind of the basis of it. We've been working with just a phenomenal group of educators and ed leaders from across the state of Wisconsin. So on Mondays, I have weekly meetings with the Department of Health Services, with our principal organization, superintendent organization, our school business association, our school board association, with some CISA representatives, and then I've also been working with you, Laurie, so your organization, as well as WIA, really thinking about how are we developing this plan with multiple perspectives at the table to think about the different dimensions of returning back to schools. I have been cautioning, which I think is prudent to this conversation today with the stakeholders who are on the line, of we do see some national trends that are happening with, and I've been calling them sort of these ideas of traps, this idea of falling into the remediation trap and really thinking about things from a deficit lens, like, oh, kids missed this much and we have to fill this skill. Instead, I'd like people to really orient themselves on leaning forward and leaning into learning. So that idea of what do we need kids to have, that social emotional learning, that sense of connectedness, and that sense of academics, to be able to hit the ground running when it comes to either the summer or the fall. So that I think is one orientation that we've been building this return to schools roadmap from. The other orientation that we've been thinking a lot about is this other thing that we're hearing sort of on the national level of really falling into this diagnostic or this assessment trap. So we can spend a lot of money and a lot of time in thinking about what did kids miss. So what we're instead encouraging people to do is to really, again, orient themselves with that grade level expectation. So thinking about what our art standards say for this grade level, and then leaning into that. If there are skills then that kids need that are prerequisite skills for the new content, then we would teach that content within that context of it. So we might do more of what we would consider a little bit of a stop and do that lesson. So it's that just-in-time learning. And then I think one thing that's been laying on my heart, which connects back to my piece on equity, about my commitment to equity education, is this idea of narrowing the curriculum. And I think that that is a trap that some people are falling into at the national level as well. So this idea of we have to focus in on specifically, really, people are zoning in on math. So we have to really hit the math. We need to hit the literacy piece, and letting everything else kind of fall to the side. And I think that's another one of those, what I would call a trap. That our kids find engagement in a well-rounded education. They find their engagement, their hook, their connection to schools, to learning, to their identity as learner, their identity as a member of their school community, oftentimes through our art classes, our career and technical education courses, science, social studies. And so when we're positioning, when we're orienting this Return to Schools roadmap, you'll see that in there, that we want to make sure that all of our subject areas are represented and that we're not falling into that narrowing of the curriculum. So I'll pause there because I know for sure I'm way over 25 words and probably over my time, but and then if you have any questions, let me know.
You know, Tamara, one of the things I want to draw out that you said was reference to a conversation I had recently with you and then the executive director of WIAA, where we talked about that idea of what our kids need and the social emotional piece. And you spoke to that danger of the narrow thinking around narrowing the curriculum. Can you speak any more to if you were able to advise on that area, the social emotional component connected to activities outside of that literacy math trap, if you will? Just speak a little bit more to that.
Sure, yeah, you bet. You know, being in a remote environment or in a virtual environment, we know statistically, like, let's just forget COVID-19. So statistically, when kids are learning in a remote environment, they have lower achievement than being in brick and mortar schools, as well as they are less engaged. And so really thinking about those two things of like pre-COVID. And then when we think about layering on COVID as a result of that, that contact, that connection is a critical role that schools play in the lives of students. And we know in the lives of the greater community too. We know that sports, after school, like drama and the theater and concerts and marching bands, at games, that is the heart of the community. That's where people come together. So it's not only for our students and our students' mental health, safety and well-being, but also really the well-being of our communities as well. So that's one of the things that we've been really thinking about, is how do we make sure that there's a placeholder for that type of connection for kids that could be coming, you know, after this June 30th, because school buildings are closed through June 30th. So starting after July 1, thinking about what does that returning to school buildings look like for practice, to get instruments for summer lessons, thinking about also making sure that there's the health considerations too while we're doing that. So that's definitely a priority because that's where our kids are needing that connection piece to really address that social emotional learning aspect.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. And as we shift over to Julie, from what Tamara has just shared, you know, many of the people who are participating today are music educators in Wisconsin, because we're hosting this for our member school music educators as well as WMEA members. So Julie, in your role as arts and creativity consultant, you're a member of CDA, the State Education Agency Directors of Arts Education. Can you share what those participating in today's forum might want to hear about the conversation you and your colleagues are having, and how these might connect to what Tamara has just shared? So bringing those conversations into sort of a Wisconsin-centric focus.
Sure. First, let me kind of share some quick background on who C-Day is, because I don't know if a lot of the people online will know who they are. Basically, it's the organization that consists of those persons at the state education agencies. Their responsibility is really education in the arts, so dance, media arts, music, theater, and visual arts. So I served as president for that organization from 2015 to 2017, and I continue to support that national organization with a lot of technology behind the scenes, websites, social media, podcasts. But their mission really is to provide a collective voice for leadership on issues that affect arts education. So we strive to kind of foster those state landscapes that work towards achieving that goal. Also looking at comprehensive, sequential, standards-based education in the arts for all students pre-K through 12. So this group has about 50 plus members. We meet monthly to work towards that mission. And we've been involved in several national projects. A few have definitely been a part of the landscape in Wisconsin. So the National Core Arts Standards has definitely taken a hold and been a great influence. And I know it's had a great influence over what WMEA has done and WSMA. We've also tapped into it with the Wisconsin Standards for Music. The other aspects that C-Day has been involved with is actually school course codes that your school districts may utilize is something that C-Day has been very integral as far as contributing and advising to what those codes look like and what the course descriptions look like for all of the arts areas, including music. So those are a few projects, several more projects that C-Day is involved with from the national landscape. You can read about some of those online through cday.org. But a lot of the current work that we've been focused on, as Laurie and Tamara were talking about, was the social-emotional learning components. We're looking very deeply as to how does that intersect with the arts. And so we're highlighting a lot of that work through blogs, podcasts, episodes in our cday.org website, so you can check those out. I've also got a series that I published through the wonderful Wisconsin School Musician magazine, which Laurie's organization works with. And so those are just great opportunities and things that we've had discussions for. One of the quick short-term things that we've put in place in response to the COVID-19 landscape that we're living in right now was the creation of the Arts Instructional Resources page. And so that web page is posted and provides a lot of resources that both educators and families can look at. So I hope that provides kind of a general overview of some of the national concerns and things that we've done to find feedback or solutions to kind of support the needs across the nation and Wisconsin specifically for us.
You know, Julie, I'm going to ask one follow-up question that's come in. We're getting several questions. We'll get to as many as we can in this forum, and then we will actually follow up with the remainder of the questions. But one of the things we keep hearing about is this idea of if we return to a physical space, school. Cindy Keeper from Stevens Point's asking about large group rehearsals come September, ideas for distancing yet still rehearsing. Are these conversations that C-Day is having, and any idea of the resources that you're recommending for those answers?
We've started to dive into that conversation, and the challenge is, of course, every state is governed differently. And Wisconsin being a local control state, there are certain decision points that will be made through a school district specifically in light of some of the state parameters and maybe guidance from CDC and some of those other really relevant, important places to make those decisions. So C-Day has been diving into that. One of the really exciting things that happened in the last 2 weeks was the arts organizations from across the nation, so NAFME, NAEA, the National Dance Educators Organizations, AFTA, AAP, you name it, all of those national arts organizations that are focused on education and support with teaching artists. We all got together, and there's about 48 people that were online together, constructing a one-page statement that just talks to the importance of the arts, the value of the arts, reminding people that it is indeed within the legislative language through well-rounded education, the importance of making sure we don't forget about the arts and that we make sure that they are part of a comprehensive educational opportunity for all of our kids, regardless of what fall brings. So the draft was basically, I saw the draft a couple of days ago, and we're hoping that that formal piece will be released in the next 2 weeks or so. But I think that becomes a foundational piece for us to all share and rally behind, to just gently and strongly remind folks that the arts are an important part of life in the landscape and allow a lot of different skills and techniques and knowledge to come through. So that's really been a big part of our discussions in the last 3 weeks, just preparing the foundational pieces, and then we'll move forward with more specific information. One last piece about what we will do locally is June 12th, 18th, and 26th, we'll have some virtual office sessions where people will congregate together, all arts people from the state of Wisconsin can get together, and we'll have those deeper conversations. And I'm hoping that as far as our pieces of information that we'll utilize when Wisconsin releases their guidelines for districts, we'll utilize those pieces as a way to identify, okay, what does it mean to have safe and healthy practices in our schools? What does that look like in art, music, theater, and dance? And having teachers talk through those ideas. So I'm very excited to start that right in June 12th. So look at the Wisconsin Arts and Creativity webpage on the professional development site, and you'll be able to register for those, and we'll have those conversations that are more specific to what we do in the arts.
So what I heard you say, Julie, is there are lots of conversations happening right now between many key stakeholders across at the national level, all art forms. There are key conversations that Tamra described happening across all aspects of educational leadership in Wisconsin. And so some of this is planning still a bit for some unknown pieces, but that those conversations are definitely happening.
Right, absolutely.
And as more is known, there are going to be places and resources people can go to connect and share. Our teachers have hold, I think, the answers to the how, but we have to know what the structure is so that that can come alive, and we look forward to that. I wanted to ask you both one more question before we start to answer the questions that are coming in as well. This question, we'll start with Julie and then follow with Tamra, is about the legislation that's already been determined in Wisconsin that students will receive a well-rounded education. We have the Every Student Succeeds Act, Wisconsin Administrative Code PI 8, which talks about access to art and music K-12, and the new Act 85 that Governor Evers signed on February 5th that places a future data point on state accountability report cards that will show us the percentage of students enrolled in music, art, theater, and dance in Wisconsin high schools. So what are some ways your DPI teaching and learning team is working to ensure access to a well-rounded curriculum is still available as we work together to figure out the how in the multiple scenarios? So now talking more centric, like what is your team at DPI actively doing together right now to ensure that the well-rounded piece is there?
I think to speak to that, so first of all, Title IV Part A is a big part of what we're able to look at as far as the language behind healthy schools and well-rounded education. So that's a big part of it. The other aspect is the social emotional learning, which I said was a common pursuit for not only our state of Wisconsin being a CASEL member of that work, but also the professional organization I belong to, CDA. We're very interested in making sure that the arts are closely aligned to the work of social emotional learning. And so I've worked with my Wisconsin colleague, Beth Herman, who's just amazing in that work and really has pointed me in some great, wonderful learning directions for my own knowledge. And I've been able to contribute a series of those articles, as I mentioned, also curated and contributed several CDA podcast episodes focused on SEL and the arts. So that's one aspect of things that we're doing from the local team section. Another common pursuit of my role with DPI and CDA is really arts education data. And so we do have the Wisconsin Arts Education Data Project, which is up. It's got information that shows some trend data from the years of 2013 to 2016. I'd like to see that continue. So we're working on just investigating what we can do to move that forward. But that relates quite a bit to Act 85. So that becomes the foundational pieces that allows us to do share that information about what courses are being, what courses are out there for kids and what are the enrollments that are happening. So I think the percentage of that goes on the report cards will have to come from some data that's being collected through the SCED codes in the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction as we share that forward. So I think that helps too. So you've got those two elements. You've got well-rounded education, which we're focused on, as well as the data component to help us identify what courses and enrollments exist in the landscape of Wisconsin arts opportunities for our kids.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate hearing about the work you're doing across both your team. And then someone asked to clarify CDAE. CDAE is an acronym, SEADAE.
Yeah.
If you're trying to look that up, again, that stands for the State Education Agency, Directors of Arts Education, CDAE. All right. Tamara, same question. Tell me about the work from your role that the DPI Teaching and Learning team is actively doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, Julie really is the one who's leading this work, so I can just add on just a little bit more to what she had said. From my perspective, I've been thinking really broadly about that idea of what it means for students to be able to access a well-rounded education, really thinking about the framing from the Title IV A piece. I feel like that's an area that sort of holds some space for arts education, and which is needed. We need to hold that space for there to make sure that it's prominent on people's radars. It also provides us some flexibility. So schools have that funding source. It's a direct funding source that schools can use to be innovative in what they're doing. So, and I think that that's part of this is how can we really make our, and I don't have answers to this, it's just some of the questions and the wonderings that I have, is thinking about forward thinking. I'm thinking forward about engaging kids in the arts, especially from this idea of kids who have been institutionally underserved or under-resourced in the arts in some of our buildings, not because of educators, but because of the structures that are within our schools, that the institutions themselves have either programmed kids out of the arts or because they were in an intervention class in elementary school, then that means that they weren't able to get into the right music class to be able to progress. So thinking about how can we structure things that might engage our kids who have been institutionally under-resourced and underserved in a way that speaks to them. So what is the intersection with Title 4A, that idea of technology and music? So thinking about some modern music pieces, what that would look like in our schools, and having a funding source to be able to pay for it. Thinking about that idea of just different course offerings for kids to be able to engage in artistic expression in a way that they haven't been able to access the arts before. So that's a little bit about it, is thinking about who hasn't had access and been engaged, because I think it's more than just access. I think kids need to be engaged in it as well, and then being able to meet those needs.
Thank you both so much for just setting this up, because the questions are pouring in. And to those that are participating today, we will answer as many of these questions in this forum as we can. And at the end of this forum, I'm going to share with you a new resource available to us in Wisconsin, where we will be able to post responses to these questions. And as more becomes known as we move through the summer, be able to update the responses. So Julie and Tamara, now I'd like to pose some of the questions that are coming in from people who are listening today. There's, of course, a worry about, if we continue with distance learning, is there a worry that there's a threat to teachers losing their jobs? I think I'm going to start by saying I don't think we can look at national models and project them on Wisconsin. And Julie had mentioned earlier, Wisconsin is a local control state. So there is a lot of control in Wisconsin at your local level, meaning your district, that in some states are statewide decisions. So we have to keep in mind that DPI makes recommendations out to school districts. Your own work in your local district is going to be one of the most powerful things you do. The conversations you have with your own superintendents and principals and teammates is going to carry a lot of weight going into fall, because that's where a lot of the
families
and
talking to families,
absolutely. And so I was going to pass it to both of you. Do you have anything to add to that? Tamara just did. So absolutely, your families. What else?
Yeah, from my perspective, again, I just go back to some of what I had started with, that idea of, I mean, I look around my house and I have my girls now are 23 and 26, right? And I think our fondest memories and the remnants in my house are my framed artwork from my girls, from their different arts classes that they took. And also, all of those videotapes of different concerts that we've been to, watching them practice, all of those pieces. And I'm not the only one. I mean, this is where communities come together. They come together through the arts. And so really being able to, I'm cautious to say this word, but to promote or to share, because I think it's something we do is we undersell sometimes what our contributions are as educators to the community. So I think it's about making what we do every day, making what you do every day and the influence that you have in students' lives visible. Visible for families, because you're going to be your biggest advocates and supports, and thinking about just bringing some awareness to it for people. I mean, you don't have to look very far during this time of COVID-19 to see really how the arts has unified, been a unifier for people within the state, across this country, and really across the world. So I think drawing some attention to that and doing a little self-promotion, just to bring people's awareness to it as well. They know it inside them, but I think it's just getting people to be aware of it. I think it's been critical, and so that's what we've been promoting.
There's another question here, very specific to DPI. Will DPI be sharing information directly with local school districts about the need to continue to provide a well-rounded education, regardless of being in person or virtual, so that music educators know their administrators and board members were made aware of this? So in what ways will DPI be communicating that?
Right. I mean, we do already. I know I talk quite a bit about it with administrators, superintendents, C&I directors, educators. There's times when I'll get emails from educators asking about, are there resources that provide them with some deeper research and links that they can share with people. And so actually in the chat, I've put a really great resource that I think provides a more broad look at Title IV Part A resources. So you can check Arts Education Partnership, but DPI also has a web page that is dedicated to talking about well-rounded as well as other aspects of the title programs. And so I keep sharing those resources with many of the people that we have those discussions for. I'll kind of let Tamara chime in too.
So regarding the return to school roadmap and regarding our summer school guidance that we put out, one of the first examples of the schedules that I put on the summer school examples for schedules was to contextualize things within project-based learning or place-based learning. And so being able to use the arts, so I front-loaded it right there, that using civic engagement, using arts education, using there was one, STEM. So I gave those as 3 examples, again, thinking about that well-roundedness. I put it front and center as the first sample about how we can do place-based, project-based learning. So that idea of thinking about how are we doing programming where kids are engaged. So there is an example, it's right there, it's the first example, and those intentional connections are being made to right within the planning resources themselves. And then the framing that I gave you today is not, it's not something special that I said to you guys, is that this is my message to every stakeholder. So to superintendents, to principals, to you name it, to different CISA organizations, is really that framing about falling into that trap of narrowing. And so that's within all of the talking pieces as well.
That's really an important piece, I think, of our conversation today is, although we invited you as a state music organization to talk with music educators, your message to us is consistent with the message that is going out statewide, and we really, really appreciate that. One of the questions here from Chris Powers, who is on the WMEA Executive Committee, he asks, with teachers who have new administration in their leadership positions or teachers who've never done this before, how might you best suggest an educator advocate for leveraging Title IVA funds at the local and building level? Are there strategies or conversations you might encourage them to have?
Julie, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I can start quickly and just give I think the first thing is to have an idea of what the needs are of your classroom. And sometimes those needs may fall into an opportunity where the funding through Title IV might be appropriate. So you have to look for those allowable activities or services that might be supported through Title IV. And I think looking at the DPI website, there is a site that specifically talks about examples of allowable activities, and you may see yourself fit within there with what you're planning with your kids. So I think first, arm yourself with that information so that you understand kind of what the parameters of certain title funds are, and then have a conversation with the person that oversees that particular project. It may be the principal, it may be someone else at the district office. You could even call either Tamara or myself and ask us if we have some guidance that we can provide to you or additional resources to share about that. But I think that would be my initial thing, is just become familiar with what are the parameters of that particular resource, and see if it fits within what you would like to do with your classroom and your kiddos.
So I think I would just expand on what Julie had said, and I think it's part of that recursive and iterative process of planning, right, and being strategic and planning. So thinking about what is it from the student perspective, what do kids need, what do you need, and then also to flipping it and really thinking about what's the strategic plan of the district, right? What are their goals, and how is what I do supporting their goals? So Julie has been doing a lot of work around social emotional learning. So, and that is a forefront right now regarding return to schools, is the social emotional learning piece. If we do not center kids' wellness, we're going to get it all wrong. And so, and I cannot stress it enough about how the arts is one of those areas that supports kids' social emotional learning. So there are a lot of resources out there that would do that. So you'll definitely see, I haven't looked at all 422 school districts across the state of Wisconsin at their strategic plans, but I've looked at quite a few. And within that, there's always that hook around that priority around student well-being and student wellness. So I would highly make those connections to that. Sometimes administrators just need to see somebody to help provide that connection between how what you do is actually supporting these bigger goals. So that would be one thing to do. I know that Laurie and I did a lot around arts integration. So thinking about getting kids to learn in content areas and using that art form as a way to partner with that content piece. I think that's another big piece. So that would be another entry point into it as a way to advocate with administrators, is thinking about the arts integration piece as well. So that could be connected to an academic goal, like what Laurie and I were able to do when we were in Madison together. So even though I was focusing in on the art or on literacy as the reading specialist, we did that through the vehicle of being able to connect art form to content area learning. And that was powerful. I think about that as the basis for UDL, for Universal Design for Learning, just that idea of how are we providing different ways for kids to engage. You know, it's about engagement. It's about multiple ways to represent information. It's about multiple ways for students to be able to demonstrate their learning. And so when I think about UDL principles, I really think about arts integration and how that just makes it very tangible and very implementable. And it's a celebration of the content areas coming together. So those are two areas.
Can I brag about Tamra for a second? In a good way, don't worry.
We can always brag about Tamra.
Oh, okay. I think many of the people on the call have experienced the disciplinary literacy in the arts sessions that we've been able to share. And that work really was established in a conversation I had when I started at Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, when Tamra was in a very different role. My worry was, my two things that I had to accomplish were to make sure that 30 pieces of artwork were put in the hallways in DPI. That was one thing I was told I needed to do. And the other thing was to implement disciplinary literacy. My worry was that it was going to become reading in the content area. And I found out very quickly, with Tamra as my teacher for learning that work 8-9 years ago, was that it wasn't that at all. It was truly looking at the context and making things meaningful that applied to the content area you're involved with. So in art, music, theater, dance, we use literacy in a very different way. And so what you've experienced in a lot of those sessions, critical thinking, speaking, listening, writing, reading, performing, those aspects really are attributed to Tamra being very supportive and understanding that we're making meaningful connections in literacy. and not reading in the content area. So you can see that I have a supervisor and colleague in Tamra who really truly believes in the arts and the importance of the arts, and that we do espouse that throughout our team. So I just want you to all be assured that what she's saying, I mean, she was my mentor as far as trying to learn and figure out how to implement literacy in meaningful ways across the arts. So just so you know that.
Thanks, Julie.
I really appreciate what you both just shared. It's that part of what I think we're up against right now is if we define what we do by the structures and systems, a lot of those may or may not be feasible for a little while due to the coronavirus. But if we can think about what we do in terms of what students at the center, what they most need, and what our content area brings to them, and really look at the how for this year maybe a little bit differently. But part of that is us being able to tell that story to the decision makers. One of our participants asks quite simply, how do we ask and find a seat at the table in our district teams that are making these big decisions? No doubt on this forum today, we have over 200 people who can figure out the how, as long as they have that seat at the table and our kids still have access. So what advice might you both have, both in your current roles, but also I know you both have played central office roles previously. How would you advise teachers ask and find a seat at that table where those district decisions are going to be made?
From my perspective, I would say, first of all, get to know who's at the table and see if you have some common interests or common pursuits, and maybe start with that first. And oftentimes when you show an interest in what someone else is doing or what they believe in, you can at least start a conversation, and then eventually they'll get to understand some of the things that are important to you or what you value, and maybe the two of you or the group of you can try to formulate some strategies to get things done with a common purpose. So I think just get to know people first, who's at the table, and try to connect with them first.
Yeah, I champion that. I think relationship is critical. So Laurie and I were fortunate to be in close proximity with each other at central office, but we were also able to develop a friendship and relationship. And in that, we were able to really get to understand each other's work. And I think that that's important too, and to see how we could work together to support our greater goals and our greater vision. So I champion this idea that Julie is bringing about relationships. So knowing who's already at the table, and then in advocating, again, promoting, I just really feel like as teachers, as educators, we undersell ourselves all the time. And there's a myriad of reasons, for that. But really to do a little bit of self-promotion about what you bring to the table, because you do bring a place to the table. But, I've been in this for a while, and it's sometimes we're not always invited to the table, so it's a matter of how do you get yourself to the table and to be able to share what you have to offer.
Thank you for that. I'm going to transition us to the last 10 minutes because we have an announcement that we are going to be making in the next few minutes in a way that we can continue this conversation not only with the Department of Public Instruction, which we're super excited about, but with many other organizations in the state. And so we've been working through your state music and local music education mission-based organizations to look at a way that we can make sure that what we're talking about in this forum today is just the very beginning of the conversation. This isn't the only conversation. Many of your questions today ask for answers around, can we have ensemble classes in the fall? What might that look like? Will we be able to sing and play instruments? You know, and there's a lot of information, again, coming out, science-based information, reactionary information. How do we localize it for Wisconsin? Be informed and aware of what's going on in other states, but really make sure we all know what's happening here. And so if you've asked a question such as, you know, what might ensemble classes look like in the fall, and should we be planning for other types of curriculum? I think, at least from what I can tell, we're a few weeks away from probably some clarity around what might be possible. But when that clarity comes, we want everyone on this forum to have access to really great information. And I also think that what I've noticed in the last 8 weeks, these very long yet very short 8 weeks, is that depending on who you listen to and where you get your information from, it either gives you hope or it brings you to a place of not really being able to see what this might look like. So we want to stay in that place of what is possible as we learn about what our state and our local school districts will do. There are organizations poised and ready to help all of you with these resources. I want to mention WMEA, Wisconsin Music Educators Association. I see Teresa's sharing. There we go. I want to mention WMEA. WMEA is specifically working right now on a music education in the time of COVID-19 position statement that will be ready very soon. And this document, this position statement on music education, is intended to be shared with every administrator in the state of Wisconsin. It will remind them of things we've talked about in the call today around the legislation that exists, but also this critically important social emotional component and the fact that the arts are part of a well-rounded education in Wisconsin. We also have other organizations that are doing really great work and creating resources for teachers. Some of those are music stores. Some of those are our friends at other music and arts organizations. So I think Teresa was going to attempt to share some slides, and we'll see if we're working in 2 different spaces, but we'll see if those go up. Otherwise, I'll walk you through what's on the slides. So our announcement today, in conjunction with just the relationship that we're having with DPI, is a new website that is launching today, and you're the first to hear the URL and location. Please keep in mind that we're building this right now, so it's set up, but content will come from the people who have just joined. The name of this website is Wisconsin Music Strong, and this is the Wisconsin Music Strong Coalition. The purpose of this group is to be able to have teachers have one place they can come to link to all the great work that's happening at DPI, through Wisconsin School Music Association, Wisconsin Music Educators, who are going to be putting out some great advocacy resources for you, Wisconsin Choral Directors Association, and then other organizations have just started to come on board. We expect this list will continue to grow through the week. This literally went out Friday, and so since Friday, Arts Wisconsin, the Foundation, Wisconsin Youth Symphony Orchestras, WISO, Hyde Music and Madison Youth Choirs have signed on, and Brass Bell is, I know, signing on as we speak. So what will happen with this website is that you'll be able to select the image or icon for that organization and go to their resources, but through the center of the website will be a blog style in real-time narrative of things that are happening and going on across the state related to resuming schools in the fall and the impact on music education. And additionally, there will be tags that will be assigned to all of those posts so that you can sort by tag the type of information you're looking for. So if you want all DPI information, you can just click DPI and it'll take you to their information. If you want to sort by advocacy, there maybe multiple associations and organizations and businesses doing advocacy work, and you can click advocacy and get to their most recent articles and blog posts. So with that, in addition, we will be hosting Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Wisconsin Music Strong. The intention of these spaces is really, again, to share the great work, but we're trying to create a Wisconsin-centric focus, because right now there's so many places you can go for national conversation, great national conversation, but then sometimes you'll hear about something happening in another state, and it's hard to know if that really truly will impact what's happening here. So 3 different platforms, and I'm going to pause here on this slide and say that we'll be sending information out to membership about Wisconsin Music Strong through both Wisconsin School Music Association and WMEA, as well as the other organizations that are joining on in that coalition. So I want to thank DPI Director of Teaching and Learning, Tamra Mouw, and Julie Palkowski from Arts. I'm sorry, I was distracted by the truck going past in front of my house because this is still working remotely. And thank Julie Palkowski, Arts and Creativity Consultant for the Department of Public Instruction, for joining us today. I know I really appreciated hearing what all you have to share. This is the beginning of our relationship together to just navigate this, and we really appreciate you being here. Do you have any final closing thoughts for the people viewing today?
Just quickly, thank you all so much for being here. We totally appreciate what you've been doing, not only in your careers with kids, but just in the last few weeks. You're a resilient, caring, awesome group of individuals, and I just love you all, and I hope we continue to connect. A quick commercial, May 21st, we will have a watch party where we can breathe in and out and just watch a TED Talk and discuss. And then a couple of weeks from now, we'll have some deeper discussions about what we can do with kids for the fall. So that's it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Profound gratitude to each one of you for what you do for our kids and our communities. So I just hope you know how deeply appreciative we are for your everyday. So thank you. And thank you, Laurie, and to the organization for putting this together. So deep and ongoing admiration for you and your work.
Thank you. And to the 181 people who have still not clicked off yet, I want to echo what Tamara and Julie just said. Although there were a few tech hiccups with this forum, I think the content was rich, and what you all do, this was to support our music educators in the state. That's what this is about. And so this journey will continue on Wisconsin Music Strong, as well as we hope there might be an opportunity for some additional forum conversations moving forward. So again, thank you, Julie and Tamara. Thanks to Teresa and my team for supporting with today. And we've recorded this, and we will be posting this on the Wisconsin School Music Association website as soon as we are able. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Cool. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, WSMA.